We're going to start with a prayer and an intention setting before our conversation begins. And so, just whenever you're ready, I'm excited for you to lead us through that.
Yes, great. So just taking a moment here to connect with our hearts and become present, tuning out the world outside of us, and connecting into our source, to that which we call God or our Creator, knowing that there is always a flow of wisdom coming in and through us. Knowing that we don't have to figure anything out, there's no right way, but there is a magical flow that is meant to be in this moment. And so we release and let go and allow this show to be in service to those who are listening and in service to our own souls. May this experience be nourishing and delightful and insightful. And may we have fun in the process, and then allow just this deep wisdom that pours through to be touching the lives of everyone who's a part of this. And that as that wisdom gets inside of us and grows inside of us, and then we share it out in new ways in our lives, we know that we are impacting this world in very positive ways. We're bringing more love and more peace and more harmony, more justice, more equality. And so we know this is all good and all love. We release and we let go of any expectations, and we just open our hearts. We ask that during this time that we are guided and protected by light, by our angels, by our guides who are here in loving presence. And we open our ears and our hearts to hear their wisdom for us. I release this word into the law, into the ethers, into the truth, knowing that it is done. Amen, and so it is.
That's so comforting. It really takes the pressure off. I love that. Do you have a prayer practice before your coaching calls and other podcasts that you do? Is that a regular part of your life?
Yes, I have learned that prayer takes the pressure off, as you've said. I'm a teacher on the Insight Timer app, and I have prayers on there that I've created for myself and or others that have become a part of my practice. So there's like a prayer over your meeting, a prayer over your project, a prayer over your presentation. That one I listened to right before I got on here.
Oh.
Because anytime I'm going to be speaking or sharing wisdom with others, that's a very specific blessing I do over myself and can be listened to by anyone who signs into Insight Timer app, being blessed for the time that I'm about to share and what that might mean. So, yes, with clients, I will pray in sessions or as they're completing something to bless it. It's something that really does create a beautiful energy around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just allows you to take that moment to breathe and reconnect to your own body. For me, I'm always in my head. And so just
Yes.
taking a second to feel my own body and feel my own breath and tune out what I can visually see around me is so powerful. But I don't have a prayer practice at this point. It's
Mm,
something that I've actually been thinking about a
mm,
bit, but it's so heavily associated with like institutionalized religion to
right.
me that it hasn't it hasn't felt appealing, but there've been moments in my life when it's something that I need, and so I want to begin incorporating it, begin
Mm,
playing with it and feeling into it. I'd love an understanding of your childhood and the spirituality that you
mm,
experienced in your childhood home and community. But before we get there, I just want to give a little bit of information to the people that are listening about who you are
mm,
and why we're talking today. And so you are at the most basic level, a career coach, I'd say. But then beyond that, you're a teacher, you're a spiritual guide, and you're an inspirational speaker. And it seems like really a shining light and an example to the people that you share with and connect with in just showing a new way to live and giving permission to really be yourself. And even through the posts that you share on Instagram, I can feel your energy and a sense of relief. I think I mentioned that to you earlier, that I just really feel soothed by
Mm.
you and what you share and what you teach. And so I'm excited to introduce you to this audience because many of us are similar to me in the sense that we've grown up in a hustle culture that encourages pushing and forcing and seeking and pursuing and achieving. And you have experienced that yourself. You have a background in
Yes.
law. Yeah. And you were very, very successful in that career. And you were a criminal defense attorney. And then you went on to an even equally, if not more, important, quote unquote, and big job
Mm.
as a managing director of a national nonprofit and
Yes.
starting a new chapter, being a founding member in Chicago. And so you've experienced, the max capacity of
Yes.
this type A structured, regimented world that we live in. And now you're really ushering in femininity and a new way to approach work in life. And it's something that I deeply need. And so I assume it's deeply needed by the people who are
Mm.
listening and by the world at large. We all need that divine feminine energy. So, with that, I would love to circle back to that starting point of your childhood and spirituality, but how were you kind of planting the seeds decades ago for what you
Yeah.
do now?
Hmm. Had such an interesting mix in my life. I did grow up with traditional organized religion that comes from my father's side, an Italian American Catholic family. So I even went to Catholic schools, grammar school, high school, college, and so
Wow.
had that really structured religious upbringing. My mother, however, had a very different background, and I also watched her grow spiritually in different ways. So she grew up in a Christian Science religion, which is it's Christian based, but it's much more about the power within ourselves and prayer. The kind of prayer I did to open our show today, that's the kind of prayer that is it is done in that religion. Um, less so structured Our Father, Hail Mary, a lot
Mhm.
more like we can speak our intention out into the world and create from that. So my mom had this different perspective that she peppered in my upbringing. And then as I got a little older, probably like 11, 12, my mom really started diving into her own spiritual awakening.
Mm.
She was in her like mid to late 30s, started reading a lot more books, started finding herself. She started to really engage in feminine empowerment. My
Mm.
mom had me in the 1970s. She did not have a even high school diploma. It wasn't a thing women did. They didn't worry about a
Mhm.
career at that time. But in the
Mhm.
1980s, my mom started cultivating a career and empowering herself to be a woman who could, have a sovereign ability to take care of herself. Spirituality was a big part of that. So what at the time was called New Age books and New Age teachers. I was reading that stuff with my mom when I was like 11 and 12 years old. So I got early exposure to a lot of the spirituality that I embrace today. Um, but it was a seed planted. That my mom also died very young. My mom died at 39,
Mm.
and
I'm so
so
sorry.
yeah, yeah, and so it was a seed planted, and then again, I had a very different spiritual upbringing with my dad's side of the family. So that didn't there was no continuity of what my mom was teaching. That was like
Mhm.
right just back into the Catholicism. Um, but I would say what I've revealed in my own spiritual awakening in my adulthood is with my mom's death sort of closed my relationship with God and spirituality for many, 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 many years. Just out of that grief and loss and not understanding. I was
Mhm.
a child. Um, and so then I found my way back to spirituality in adulthood. But those were the early seeds and the early beginnings.
Yeah, you've mentioned in the past that you even experienced um some strengths, I guess, that were a bit associated with your intuition or with healing when you were younger.
Mm,
Did that feel natural to you, or is that something
mm,
that,
mm.
um, your
Yeah,
mom had mentioned or called out or taught to you?
yeah.
I'm just curious where those, skills, natural born, innate, it
Yes.
seems,
First
skills
of
came
all,
from.
Stephanie, you impressed me with how much you've done your homework and research on me. So great. So great. So yes, that's a fun question. Well, we're going to talk at some point about genius and what
Yeah.
that is. And, our inner genius is something that is seen in our childhood. And when I look back now, there are some things I did in childhood and it's like, whoa, that's amazing that that was a part of who I was. Um,
Mhm.
so yes, there were some skills in childhood that came out early on. One is I actually used to practice massage on my family members. Um, where did that come from? I don't know, but I believe now that I mean, like things like Reiki are so huge, like hands-on
Mhm.
healing. I would just, my mom, my brother, and I'd make them pay me because, I was so
Oh
good
my
at it.
god.
Yes, it wasn't very expensive because I was like 7 years old, but, um, I was using this gift as a child by putting my hands, to help relieve stress and tension in my family, and I believe that's really a spiritual gift that I believe very much in today as an adult.
Mhm.
The other thing too, I would say, my mom, as I said, was getting all these empowerment books, spiritual books, and when there were things going on inside of our family, I literally would take those books and I would like look at them and look at my mom, and I'd be like, okay, and I'd start asking her questions, like coaching her out of the
Wow.
books. Like it was just very natural and innate for me to be that way, to express myself in terms of wanting to help heal and create a sense of harmony where things were maybe out of balance.
That is so incredible. Kids are incredibly powerful, and we
Hmm.
will talk about that later. I'm excited too because I have now 7 nieces and nephews. 2 are just newborn, so I can't
Mm,
really see anything with them. But it's fun to see how different they are so early on, and these things that just
mhm.
come out of their mouths, and you don't even know where they learned them or observed them. I have one niece who loves to journal now, and she loves to do a nighttime meditation to like self soothe. It's
Yes.
so cool
Wow.
to see.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It's really incredible to see
Mm.
their natural abilities and what they're attuned to. And I really think that they have it right. And
Yes.
then societal pressures come in and morph the way you think and the way you look
Yes.
at the world. And so, do you feel like that's what happened to you in your pursuit of law? Was it early on when you were even in grade school that you
Yeah.
started, adopting more of an achiever mentality or a
Mm.
masculine approach?
Yeah. I mean, my own personal story. I've always been a like determined. I have video footage of my eighth grade graduation, and my dad was giving a speech at my party, and he said, "And she's going to go to law school and become a lawyer." And this was a seed he had planted. It was something my dad really wanted. It's that I want to see my children do better than me, and he had friends who were lawyers, and just admired some of the things that they were able to do. So he wanted that for me. And I did not know what I wanted to do with my career path. Um, so I was very mutable. Like I didn't know who I was or what I wanted at that time. So it's interesting. It's like he, as my father, probably cast out this prayer for me, and doors really did open in that direction. When I was in college, I, just went to college and studied accounting because I was pretty good at it. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. But then through a connection in college, I got a job in a small law firm in that community. And so I actually started working in law. It was a
Mm.
really fulfilling job. I worked for a wonderful man who became an amazing mentor in my life. And he really encouraged that I go to law school and, like, gave me a day, like, fill out your applications for law school. And, he's just couldn't have been more generous to encourage me. I did end up getting into law school. He ended up paying for like a third of my first year's tuition. Like doors just opened and
Wow.
opened in that direction. So I
Yeah.
followed it, even though I always was kind of like, well, it's interesting because I had some experience in a law firm, but I wasn't sure that that was what I wanted. I just followed this path that was opening, which I think is true for a lot of people who, a door starts to open. Could be a college counselor tells you something, or your parents want something for you. You start going down a path,
Yeah.
and the doors kept opening and opening and opening and opening. I kept moving forward and forward and forward and forward, and there I was.
That's so interesting. So there really was quite a bit of natural flow. And like you said, at
Hmm.
that point, coming out in college, coming out of college, you're really just trying to do your best and uh, earn a paycheck eventually,
Yeah.
and do the absolute best you can with the resources that you've been given. And best is kind of defined by the environments that we're in and the people that we're around. That's so interesting that there was so much natural flow. Do you think
Hmm.
looking back on it, it was because you were meant to have had that experience
Hmm.
of a legal career and being in such a structured environment and in pursuit to something so challenging so that you could find your way here with that experience and knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I don't today make it wrong that I had that
Mhm.
experience, and the coaching that I do now with professionals in different, high pressure jobs, whether they're like earlier on getting started trying to find their way, or they're like leading an organization at this point. I can understand exactly what they're going through. So there is a
Yeah.
way that I get to be a bridge for people, into more authenticity, into their spiritual path, into tuning into their genius, because I've had those experiences. So I don't look at it as wrong. I look at it as, it was my way.
Yeah, yeah. And you really did it big time. I mean, you were top of your class in law school. You
Mm.
started a side business writing legal
Yeah.
briefs. How did all of this feel in the moment?
Hmm. Well, I mentioned that my mom died young, and that was the biggest challenge of my life. I mean, I've faced more since then, but such grief. I was a child when she died, and for me, what happened was when I got this job in college in a law firm, like it gave me purpose. So,
Mm,
I really was thriving inside of work in a way that I had not been thriving in life. I was really pretty depressed, and um, just felt kind of lost, and work gave me purpose.
And what about the environment that you were in and the people that you were around? Did it feel,
Mhm.
collaborative and like a strong community that was supportive of you?
That's a really good question, actually. Like I was respected, because I was smart and I had a skill set that was unique inside the criminal law field. Like I was needed. I had certain assets that really added to, the firms that I've worked for.
Mm,
Um, but it was very masculine. I worked with all men. There was just a few occasions that women wove into the picture, and so the experience, it's like, yes, there's like a camaraderie among peers and like the firm and who I worked with, but it is a very, masculine environment that's about competition and war. We're going to trial. We're going to war.
yeah. Yeah.
It's very based in like logic and, intellectual argument. So it's, to me now, when you ask me something about like support and community, I look more towards the feminine, which feels really good to me, which is more about like collaboration where we're all contributing our gifts and supporting one another. It would never to me be competition. That just doesn't
Mhm.
feel supportive for me. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just not, to me, what feels good in a work environment. So it was different. It was very masculine, and what I think, thrives in currently in a lot of industries, that masculine energy.
Yeah, I have found myself in those industries throughout my career. And so I understand that
Hmm.
feeling. And for me, it's been a learning experience to understand the difference between feeling good in my role or in on my team or in my company because I'm doing well and like meeting certain marks. That feels really
Mm-hmm.
good.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's very different from feeling good because I'm lit up by doing the things that help
Yes.
me meet those marks. And so
Mm-hmm.
it took a long time to differentiate between the two. I guess it would be like external validation versus internal validation.
Mm, mm,
And for some people, I'm sure that those can go hand in hand in their role, and I hope that they do for mine eventually, But how would you say that somebody starts to differentiate that for themselves?
yeah.
Because it can be difficult to recognize for a
Mm-hmm.
bit. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you've experienced that in coaching.
That external validation, it's so much a part of the social conditioning that we've received. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
we're a child taught to be a good girl or a good boy and do what mommy says and wants. And, we go to school and it's about getting the good grades. And then we're a good boy or a good girl. It's like, it's just reinforced all the time. Um, And so what happens is we build this ego identity that has this belief of how we should show up in the world. And so things like achievement become really important. Things like pleasing others, making others proud becomes really important. However, what that is covering is our soul, our own true authentic expression, which to me is the real gift we've been given in life, is that we are all unique beings with unique gifts that are this expression of the divine or God moving through us. And if we can allow ourselves to be that authentic expression, there's this beautiful harmony in the world. Like things are just harmonious and they work,
Mm-hmm.
and we're like nature, it just works. But most of us are living inside that ego identity of trying to fit in. And what's happening in this time in the world is that it's becoming unsatisfactory for people. And I would say I'm an example of this, and this is happening with many. Is like, you achieve success and the things you're supposed to have and the prestige. I achieved that. I was in my late 20s and I had achieved that already.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, well, but now what? This isn't it. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't it. It wasn't satisfying. I needed that soul expression to show who I was and what I was meant to give in this world and not fit in a box. And so that's what I believe happens to a lot of people, is that ego expression works for a period of time and you're learning how to operate in the world. And then you're like, but wait, is this what I really want? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And that's the questions we start asking. That's what I started
Yeah.
asking as a lawyer. Like, is this really what I want to be doing with my life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I guess, more spiritually, do you think there's divine timing around
Mm,
around that questioning? Because
mm,
you obviously asked yourself those questions pretty early on, but
mm.
some people ask those questions much later. Do you, just
Yeah,
your own personal beliefs, do you think there's divine timing around that?
I do. I believe things occur. Um, it's like nature. There's a natural flow to how things occur, and we can beat ourselves up that, oh, I wish I knew this sooner. I wish this happened
Mhm.
sooner. But you were working on other things sooner.
Mhm.
There's, who knows, maybe you had karma, you had to work out in a situation with someone. And then once that's complete, oop, now you're up level 2 to this next thing that you're meant to work on. Like, my sense is when we die, it'll all be like revealed in this like picture that will be like, oh my gosh, it all fit together. I believe that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a faith concept that helps me have peace, is that things are happening in a divine time.
And so with your timing, what began to happen? You obviously reached, the highest level that you could, where you started to feel like you
Mm-hmm.
should be more satisfied and you weren't feeling
Mm-hmm.
that satisfaction. What did that realization look like for you? And how did you begin stepping away from that? This conversation is really centered around getting back to your creative power and reconnecting to your creative
Yes.
power. And so I'd love to hear your process of
Mm-hmm.
the awakening moment and then how you started to, develop that reconnection for yourself.
Yes. I would say one of the things that has always influenced me is when I would notice people, whether there's somebody I knew or somebody famous or whatever that I read about, I always noticed people who were doing things that I wanted to do. And I would be like, well, how did they do that? I'd want
Mhm.
to understand it.
Yep.
Um, One of the words I use about myself is I consider myself an autodidact. That is a self-taught person. So
Mm.
yeah, so I have a lot of degrees. I have a doctorate degree in law, but beyond law school, I never stopped learning. I've been studying all about how do we create and watching other people and learning esoteric principles or metaphysics about how we create. And so I started to see like I'm like there's something that people know how to do that I don't. And what I would say now is it's very much about like we're taught in this social conditioning to operate like in a victim way, like we don't have power over our lives. Like you go get a job and then your boss is going to set your pay and your boss is going to tell you when to work and how, and it's like this victim mentality of how we go to work. Oh, I go to the doctor and the doctor has all the answers for me. I don't know
Mhm.
what's wrong with my body, right? Like we just so conditioned to be victims in our lives. And so what I've always been interested in is like how do we not be victims? What's the next level of life? And to me, that is creative power, that we are no longer just subject to what's happening to us. We can create. So for me, the very first step I took back in my life of like I was a lawyer, I didn't understand. I looked at my brother, and my brother's a few years older, and he was living much more independently and happy than me. My dad wanted him to be a lawyer. He didn't go to law school. He followed his own path. He did his own thing. And
How'd
I
he do
remember
that? Dang
right.
it.
So
Just
so at some point I asked him, I'm like, what are you doing
Yep.
differently than me? And yeah, and at the time he pointed me to the self-empowerment programming that he was involved in.
Mm.
That was a community that was about, coming together in community, talking about creating the life that you want. Um, and I was like, oh, wow, that sounds really interesting. He goes, well, I've been telling you about this for a while.
Oh, really?
Yes. But
How
I'd
funny.
never heard him. It kind of goes back to what you were saying about divine timing. Like he'd been talking about this. He'd been trying to help me, seeing I was unhappy. But finally, one day, I was so unsettled in my own life that I went to him for advice. And at this point, I heard him. And so I sought out that same community to learn, principles of creating my own life. I studied their programming for about 2 years. These sorts of proactive communities are much more widespread. In fact, I mean, I'm creating one here in Chicago as well. But finding a place that is about creating the life you want, whether it's spiritual or more psychologically based or just community based, that to me was something I sought out. It's like I want to learn how to do this, to not feel stuck,
Yeah.
to not feel like a victim.
Wow. And did that feel pretty radical to you at the time?
Yes, everybody thought I was in a cult.
Classic.
And some of these organizations can have a little culty vibe in some ways,
Mhm.
but it was out.
Everything does. So does
Hmm.
CrossFit. So does a
Yes,
cycling
exactly.
group. It's a community.
It's a community, yes, that starts to wrap together around certain ideas. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, it was radical, but it in 2 years that I spent learning inside that programming, I did start changing my life and taking back the power of my life. And that was the time in which I it was inside one of the classes that I was taking that I had this big major insight that I'm like, oh, I know how I could quit my job. I'm gonna just freelance legal work, which is what I had done in law school. Now, this is a thing people do all the time now is freelancing. I like just made it
Uh-huh.
up back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And so I found a way to like break away from my law firm job, which while it was a great opportunity,
Yeah.
I very grateful for it. I knew that I was on the path to opening a new door. I didn't know what the new path was. But I could not be in the intensive pressure of law firm life to figure it out. It was too much. So I needed a bridge. I call it a transition role. I needed a bridge so that I didn't have all that pressure on me. That I could take some time to explore who I was and what I wanted. And so that was the practical then first step. It's like, okay, step away from
Yeah.
the high pressure job. have this lesser responsibility, still working while I'm taking space to figure out what is next.
Okay, I'd love to dive into that for a second because I know it scares a lot of people to
Yes.
step away from something that appears very
Hmm.
secure on the
Hmm.
outside.
Yes.
And even so you had this new vision for yourself and you knew that something was coming down the line, but you weren't exactly sure what it was yet. So you took a role that or you developed a role for yourself that wasn't exactly it. And I'd like to
Hmm.
know kind of what your thoughts were around that transition period
Hmm.
for yourself because it's easy to get caught up in, well, I know that law isn't it, so I'm not going to take another
Right.
law adjacent job or
Hmm.
earn my money that way. How did you
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that?
I have so many thoughts here. So let me organize them. So, the first thing I really want to say is if you are totally frightened and frozen, you're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
There is there are foundational pieces to have in place that allow you to make this kind of change. And that is something that's really important to remember. We can get so black and white, like, oh my God, I'm so scared, but I should do this. And, like this
Mm-hmm.
pressure. And it's like, no, no, no. There is a step that is gentle that you're ready for. And that's really all a transition like mine, out of one safe, secure career path that I worked many years to build into a dream job is like 1,000 small steps.
Yeah.
And there are the big moments, like the moment I quit my job, sure. But there's so much that gave me that foundation. So, one of the really essential things I teach, I remind us to trust our feelings. Like, if I am totally frightened, I am not ready. I don't have that foundation under me yet. So, like, for me, very first step was talking to my brother, like, you're happier. What did you do? And he tells me
Mm-hmm.
about something. And now I try that out. And now I'm getting to know myself for a while. I'm not making any changes. I'm like getting some tools, right? So it's just important to know that, like, listen to yourself and don't force yourself faster than you're ready. There is a natural progression that will feel safe and will feel honoring, and it may really include having other people around you, a coach, inside a community, like these places and spaces that can help you do this with a safety net. So that's a first piece that's really important to understand. With those things in place, that was when I had just even the aha moment of what I could do for what I now call a transition role. Um, a transition role, as I define it now, it's a job that you take while you're trying to figure out the next thing, or even if you know the next thing, you're building the next thing and you're not ready to give it, it's like, this is the full-time money pressure, how I'm gonna, live. You're moving towards it. So a transition role often looks like a lateral move or even a step back because you're taking pressure off yourself. And this is sometimes hard for the ego,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? It may be less money, but enough money. It's enough money that it's what you need to get by. Um, but it's a role that you can do with relative ease. It gives you the time that you need for self discovery or for beginning to open your new path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in some ways, what I think is the blessing we can add on top is if a transition role will in some way start to open the door to what is next. For me, um, what I did was I just had a freelancing business as a legal writer. I was very good at writing legal briefs, and this is something I had done in law school. I had many different lawyers would hire me to write their briefs. So when I quit my law firm, I had offered them. I said, "Listen, I have several commitments with you that I can keep. I will do these
Mm-hmm.
writing projects. I didn't have to go to court anymore. I usually didn't even have to meet with clients anymore. It was just like, these projects were handed to me that I would do on my own time. So it was like a true freelancing role. And to me, that was a great way to develop some more like of my own creative power, because now I'm my own
Mhm.
boss, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm proving that I can lead my own life. So while it wasn't the substance of the work, as a transition role, it was opening me up to being more of a leader and more empowered in my life. So transition roles will do that. They will pay the bills. They will be some kind of a easeful job that you have space for something else, and they're in some way helping open up to the next.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, that's really, really helpful to hear because I can be very black and white and think that, okay, I know this isn't right. I have to find the thing that is, the
Mm.
perfect thing that is, and
Mm-hmm.
that can stop you from taking action. And that might even be intentional subconsciously, who
Yes.
knows? But you mentioned creative power and that this role allowed you to connect to your creative power by being a freelancer. And then I know that you explored a couple of other things during this transitional period for yourself. Can you just tell us what is creative power
Mm.
and why does it matter to connect back to it?
Mm-hmm. I would imagine there are non spiritual ways based in science to describe this, but that's not my
Hmm.
forte. My forte is more spiritual. So
Yeah.
I'm going to explain it that way.
We love that. That's why you're
Okay.
here.
Okay. Um, so I believe there is a creative source. Call it the infinite, call it God, call it the collective. Call it magic, but there is some creative energy. I don't believe it's a person. I believe it's an energetic structure that has given life to Earth, to the humans on it, to the animals on it. There's some kind of source that is the soul that is, I believe, ongoing, and then the breath that moves through us while we're actually on the planet alive. And my belief is that we, each of us who are here and alive, are creative expressions of God, of this energy. And so when we just allow ourselves to be ourselves, we can create just as God created us. We have the ability to feel into our own soul and desire and want something. So creative power begins with our desires. I believe that that which is our desire is the way that the universe wants to express through us. We're just all these expressions. And as I said earlier, if we're all following our expressions, there's this beautiful harmony of how things work. This is like how nature, things grow and die and change and morph. So when we listen to our own desires, um, there's something we feel, an impetus, a want to create. And so when we follow that and we speak the words, we hold the intentions, we take the actions, when we do that, that is the use of our creative power, that we actually are not meant to just be victims in this life to what other people want of us. We are meant to be in our own sovereign state, want a certain career, want to go down a certain path, and be able to hold the intention, the belief, the desire, and then take the action to open that into formation. So that is what I would say creative power is. Some use the language manifesting. It's become very popular language. Like, I have a desire and then I manifest it. That's the idea. I like the language creative power more because to me it takes the ego out and feels more like it's something I'm doing in alignment with my soul and what is really mine to do on this earth.
Mhm. It feels more proactive as well. I know
Mm,
that the intention behind manifestation isn't to just set an intention and move on with your regular habits and day to day life, but oftentimes that is the takeaway for many people that they're
mm,
just manifesting a new life or manifesting a new career without taking action. And the way
mm,
that you just described it really involves expressing yourself and learning new ways to express yourself. So how do you do that? And for someone who might not be spiritual but is open to it, like
hmm.
kind
Yeah.
of looking for any way to do this, what would be a start for somebody to begin expressing themselves? One
Hmm.
thing that you even mentioned was language. Is it
Yes.
is it reading a book? Is it
Hmm.
listening to the teachers that might come across
Mm.
your phone through the podcasts, or Instagram or something, how would somebody begin to connect or navigate
Hmm.
back to their creative power? Because we all have it. It's
Yes.
finding our way back.
Yes. So I would say it's unplugging from the information that is constantly flowing to us, like the news media or social media, music, television. These are like pre-programmed, victim-based, um, uh, energies. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And when we just continue to like absorb that energy, we exist in that way ourselves. So first, it's unplugging from some of that. I think we all these days can appreciate it's like. Oh, it's nice when I took a social media break, right? Like you're
Mhm.
more connected to who you are.
Yep.
So I would say that's part of it, is unplugging, so that you can then really listen to and hear yourself. Um, I have a practice on the Insight Timer app that is called the Heart Practice, and it's a 3-minute daily meditation that I guide. So, if you tune into it, all there is for you to do is put in your headphones or play it on your phone, listen, close your eyes, and you're guided for 3 minutes in a heart meditation. And the idea here is connecting to your heart, getting out of your head, which has all these ideas and all this stuff going on up there, and just being in your heart space. And when you're in your heart space, you can hear what your own desires are, right? So you're unplugging and then plugging into your own heart. So this is a really great way to begin to cultivate your creative power, because you now know what you want. The third piece I would add is, yes, finding teachers, guides that are speaking this kind of language, that are helping you know you have the power to create. Whether it's reading a book, following someone like me on social media who's talking about these things. It's like it's like what you unplug from and then what you plug back into. You listen to people who are reminding you that you are a sovereign being and a creative power and this divine manifestation of the infinite. And when you hear that, you start to have a different energy about you, and it's a sense of empowerment to be someone who can go create. So it's the unplugging and then replugging.
What were some of the ways that you began to express yourself? You mentioned freelancing. That was probably massively empowering to you just in your
Hmm.
own self confidence. But from a creative sense, was there anything that
Mm.
you experimented with that
Oh,
just
yeah.
didn't really lead? Like, it doesn't have to always lead
Hmm.
to something.
Hmm.
I can be very attached to the outcome when
Yes.
I try something new. Was there anything you tried that was just like for the pure joy and expression of it?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought this up, because when you are someone who's very unclear what it is that you desire, and you are maybe really plugged in, like I was as a lawyer, I was really plugged into what everybody else wanted from me. So not only was my dad so proud of me as a lawyer, but now I had these people in my firm who were depending on me and counting on me to be there in the long run with them, and right. So now I've got them wanting me to be a certain way, and clients who relied on me, and right. So, how do you start to break free of what everybody else wants? One
Yeah.
of the great steps to begin, if you don't know who you are or what you want, to begin to find yourself, is to just go do what brings you joy. And so let the universe guide you. So I have a fun story about this. I was at a Casey and the Sunshine Band concert. This is a band from the
Love.
1970s.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
1970s disco. I was at a concert, and I was there. I was this, young, confused lawyer, but I'm with some friends having a good time. And there's a backup dancer in the back, and she was having such a good time, just like J Lo, and she's just, I mean, I was
Yeah.
like in awe of this woman. I'm like, I want to be her. When I was a little girl, I loved to dance, and
Mhm.
I was in like the talent show in school, and like I just loved dance. And so I was watching this woman, and I'm like, I need more of that in my life. That's what I need. So within a couple weeks, I had a friend. So part of this community I was in, this empowerment community, I had a friend. He went by Big Gay Jim. That was his nickname.
Love it.
And he was in the theater in Chicago. He worked for a big theater company, but also had his own like small production company and put on shows. And he had a show coming up, and I was like, Jim, can I do a dance routine in your show?
That's amazing.
And he's like, "Of course you can."
Oh
And
my god.
so I ended up, so he had this variety show. It was a circus theme. So every different act had something to do with the circus. I produced and choreographed a 3-part skit with myself and 3 men that we were like this we were the tiger act in the circus, and Big Gay Jim played our tiger tamer, and he was mean. But all we really wanted to do, not we didn't want to do tricks, we wanted to dance. We wanted to dance and be the dancing tiger act. And so it's this 3-part series about how we disobeyed Jim and went out and became dancing tigers, and we
Oh
got
my
the whole
god.
audience in an uproar of excitement dancing at the end of the show, and we triumphed.
That's
and
incredible.
and all my lawyer friends in the audience must have been like, "What is she doing?"
That's incredible. That sounds like so much fun. I want to be
So,
there.
yes, so much fun. So, did that lead to my next career? No,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it opened myself to joy, to creativity, to sovereignty. And whoever's listening, it's like whatever that is for you, going to a yoga class or taking an art class or just doing something that to you feels fun and joyful is going to begin to open the door to who am I and what do I want to do in this world. It opens that creative vibe to tap back into like, what is my genius? What am I here to do?
Yeah.
So it does have a purpose, even though it could seem like it's frivolous, but it really does have a purpose.
That's incredible. As we wrap up part 1, I would just love to hear why this is step 1. Why are we
Mm,
talking about connecting to your creative power first?
yes. So what I love about your show is you have people come on and tell their story about taking a leap of faith, finding this dream role, what they really feel they're meant to do, and how did they do it. And so for me, this is what I help clients do. I'm a career coach that helps people find their genius. What is it that I was born to do and step into it? I wish I could just intuitively tell people what their genius is because I could read it a lot of the time and they would just go do that thing. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. I've tried. I tried in the beginning. Just like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. Okay, go do it. No. There's all this programming that we have to recognize as programming. We think it's the truth. And so by taking the space to look at how the world is working, unplug from what everybody else wants, and plug back into our creative power, it's like we have to remember that I'm here, I'm in charge of this experience. And that's great, and that's a great thing. All those desires in my heart, like we were talking about little children in the beginning, like it's all possible. It's all possible. And we need to remember that. The conditioning that we receive is about making us smaller and fit more in a box and be less of who we are. And so I could sit here and tell you, you're meant to do, you have this fabulous singing career and go out in the world and be, touring. And if you don't have that connection to your creative power, you'll never do it, no matter how much you want to. We have
Mhm.
to have that connection to our creative power, and then we can start to listen to and find those inner dreams and begin to follow them.
I love that. I love that so much. And I just want to pull out a few things from what you shared in this part of the conversation is I want to highlight that you mentioned gentle. It's meant to be gentle, and if you are terrified, you might not be ready for that next step. There will be a gentle step that you can take. I think a lot of the people that are here are ready for a big change and also probably have felt a bit of suffering in the path that they've taken so far. You're allowed to be gentle with yourself. You're allowed to go slowly and it should feel good. Everything that you described sounded fun. It's a way to get back to yourself and understanding of yourself, and there will be moments of that are uncomfortable, but ultimately the goal is to feel that joy that you did on stage dancing with tigers. It's this process will bring you back to that feeling, be kind to yourself and just feel that joy. So I love where we started here, and we'll be coming back with part 2. And if people need to take time through this series, take time. Like, sit with connecting back to your creative power for as long as you need to, until that starts to feel comfortable and you feel like you've gotten there. And then you can move on to step 2 of finding your genius, but be patient with yourself. Be patient. So thank you so much.
One last thing before you go. It would mean the absolute world to me if you could tap those cute 5 little stars wherever you're listening. If you just click the show's name on your screen right now, it'll take you to the show's page where you can rate and review with your thoughts. And it is a tremendous deal in the charts so that more people can join this community. I am so grateful.